My name is Eric Stahl, and I am in the bass section of the Baltimore Symphony. I came in 1982, and my first concert was the first concert in the Meyerhoff Hall. My dad played bass in the Minnesota Orchestra, so I grew up around it, and some of my earliest memories are hearing the bass. And it's funny because this was my dad's main instrument, this bass right here, that he passed away about 15 years ago. And I'm extremely sentimentally attached to it. From when I was a very little child, I remember watching him play, standing down here, looking up from my head was about the same height as the bridge. And play from down there. Now I'm looking at it from the other direction, and I love the bass. So I went to Northwestern University for 4 years. Before that, I went 1 year Interlochen Arts Academy, which was high school, but I still consider it part of my training. So I actually started when I was in 4th grade, but I wanted to play even earlier. In 3rd grade, I remember going to the orchestra room, and they had a small little bass, and I came home and asked my dad, I want to start. They said, you can't until you're in 4th grade. You know, you have to be a little bit bigger. So then I did start then, and didn't take it very seriously all through grade school and into early high school. I did it for fun. I'd play in the orchestra once a week. And I still liked doing what my dad did, but I didn't ever think of it doing it as a career. And then when I was about 16, my dad took me to a performance of the Handel Messiah where he was playing, and he gave me a score to follow. And as I was watching the bass part and hearing it, something clicked, and that was it. Suddenly I realized it could be really fun to play the bass, and I just started practicing like crazy, went to Interlochen, and never looked back. So I started out with a half-size bass, and then basically 3/4 size, and most basses are 3/4 size, that's what they call it. This one I would think would be called a 7/8 size. It's quite a big bass. You can't really see it on the tape, but it's very wide. And it also has very high shoulders. We'll talk a little more about that later. But anyway, it's especially big, partly because it has a 5th string. For the old Italian basses that were, not built strong enough to take the extra pressure of that 5th string, they would put the C extensions up on the top to go all the way down to C. But the larger instruments, they would reinforce the internal parts, and then they'd put a 5th string on. I'll demonstrate it more later, but this one goes down to a B. So it's a real big bass. So the lowest note on the cello is this note. That's their low C. And most of the time the bass is an octave below the cello. So this one can keep going down from there to the low C. And because this bass is tuned to B, I can go even a half step lower. Right. Then you can go very high too, but it's a bit more of a stretch up there. It's partly because the amount of pressure to lock it into the string is more than a violin would need. So if you get too far from the tip, you can't really get enough pressure. So the other reason is that the string vibrates slower, and therefore the bow moves slower. You don't need it as long as a violin bow. They have the very fast vibrating string, and in order to keep, to match that, they have to go faster, and they need much more bow. Besides carrying it around and having to schlep it, which is one of the big, and I was going to tell a story that when I first went to school in Northwestern in Chicago, I took the bass, it wasn't this one, on an elevated train, which was no problem. But then when I got off, the only way that I could see to get out was the turnstile. I thought, well, there's only one way to try. So I started into the turnstile and I got stuck in there. And it took about 5 minutes until I could kind of weave myself around enough to just get myself out. And then the next time I came, I found there was another place where I could just lift it over the gate and have to go through the turnstile. But anyway, there's lots of other difficulties of trying to have to, you get your exercise, bringing it around. Okay, But musically, some of the difficulties are, here's an example. This, from one first finger, I don't know if you can see that, first finger to fourth finger, that's a whole step. 1, 2. And this is what it sounds like. I mean, I think that would be almost an octave on a violin. One whole step. So that what that involves is the strings are a fourth apart instead of a fifth. The cellos can do a lot of things staying right in one position because they have a fifth between notes, but this one is only a fourth. So that means you have to shift a lot more. So a D scale looks like this. So I kind of call it the bass, the trombone of the string section. We do quite a lot of shifting. This is an octave. It's about 3 feet to shift. Beethoven was fascinated by instruments that were in the process of improving. They were doing a lot of technological improvements on various instruments. One of them was the French horn, I think, and somebody came and played for him, and he was so impressed that he composed some new and more challenging music for the horn. Similar thing happened with the bass. Who knows how much of it is myth and how much is folklore, but the famous bass virtuoso, Domenico Dragonetti, who was Italian, came and played for Beethoven. They set up a time and he played for Beethoven. And Beethoven had no idea that the bass could do the things that Dragonetti could do. He wrote a concerto, Dragonetti did, and he was a virtuoso. And after he finished playing for Beethoven, the myth is that Beethoven went over and hugged Dragonetti. And some people have the myth that he actually hugged the bass, which I prefer. I think he was so taken with the bass. He loved that sound, and he realized, oh my gosh. I'm not sure the exact date that happened, but you can trace it. The Fifth Symphony is when he started making much more prominent use of the bass. The scherzo. He gives the melody to the basses and cellos, very important. But the biggest example is the Ninth Symphony. He gave the recitative to basses and cellos. And I was reading up about it. The image he was going after was something a bit like a Greek drama, where he had the commentary on all the chaos that was in the world and the various attempts of people to solve their problems. And then he wanted the voice of sort of a godlike character to make a statement to the human race. And the Ode to Joy itself, that theme, he was viewing that as a hopeful kind of an anthem for all peoples from all over the world to join in. And it's kind of cool to see that is kind of becoming, it actually is happening in some instances. Like when they took the Berlin Wall down, they played Beethoven Ninth, Ode to Joy. It's just a theme that everybody in the world can get behind. And that's what Beethoven had in mind for it. Anyway, so it's a real honor that he chose the bass. It's an imposing instrument. It's got the low, kind of baritone sound. And then he used a human baritone after the basses and cellos to repeat that statement with words. favorite thing about the bass is the sound, the actual visceral, low vibration of it. It's great to play in the high range of the bass and everything too, but the thing that we have that no one else has is that low sound. I'll kind of demonstrate just a little bit here. And my very favorite passage is Also sprach Zarathustra, and it actually uses a low B. So I'll demonstrate that. In Also sprach Zarathustra by Strauss.